Watch any freestyle race and you'll see different arm recoveries. Watch freestyle races over different distances and you'll see general tendencies towards different arm recoveries. Why are these differences occurring and what are the underlying principles of effective arm recoveries? Let's check it out. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. Arm recoveries are a critical component of an effective freestyle. After swimmers create propulsion, they need to move the arms back into position to create propulsion again. So an effective arm recovery is one that allows swimmers to get back in position to create more propulsion again and do so with as little cost as possible. So arm recoveries that are slow relative to the event and relative to the stroke rate that swimmers are trying to create are going to be a problem. So fast recoveries are good recoveries, but it's not just about speed. Swimmers can only produce so much energy so quickly for so long. There's a limit. So as much of that energy needs to be used to create as much propulsion as possible. If the arm recoveries are extremely taxing, if they're extremely fatiguing, if they're using a lot of energy, that's going to prevent swimmers from creating more propulsion. They're either going to have less energy available to create propulsion, or because of fatigue, the recoveries are going to slow down. That means a lower stroke rate. That means less speed. So not only do recoveries have to be fast, they have to be as easy and as energy efficient as possible. That's going to allow swimmers to use the energy that they do have available to create propulsion and to maintain their stroke rate. Now there's one more component here. The recoveries also have to be effective in that the arms have to be recovered in a way that allows swimmers to quickly and easily create propulsion. So for instance, if the swimmer has a fast, effortless recovery, but the hand enters across the opposite shoulder, well, now swimmers aren't going to be in position to create propulsion effectively. They're either going to have to move their arm, which is going to take a lot of time, or they're going to have to initiate the stroke from that position, which is going to be really ineffective. And so as much as possible, the recoveries have to be direct and that they place the arm in an effective position for creating propulsion. It can't be too wide. It can't be too narrow. It has to be where it needs to be for the swimmer to create propulsion. So those are the underlying principles of effective arm recoveries in freestyle. They have to be fast, they have to be easy, and they have to be direct. When it comes to finding an effective solution, swimmers are guided by those goals and their own physical structure. So the range of motion that they have, the length of their limbs, the strength that they possess, that all affects what's going to be fastest, what's going to be easiest, and what's going to be most direct. So for example, if a swimmer has really, really long arms and they're particularly weak, it's going to be difficult for them to recover the arms pretty straight because that's going to require a lot of strength to move that really long lever, and it's going to take a lot of time. And if they don't have the strength to move the arm really quickly, again, that's going to take even more time. And of course, it's going to be very energy intensive. So a swimmer's physical capacities, their physical structure is going to directly influence the recovery that's going to be best for them. A second consideration is the event being swum. The slower the distance, the more time swimmers have to recover their arms because stroke rate is not limiting their speed to the same extent. And the timing of the arms are such that one arm tends to be more patient out in front. And so that gives the swimmer more time to recover the arms as well. However, in the sprints, swimmers have to find strategies that allow them to move the arms really fast and place them in positions to create propulsion almost immediately. So swimmers can't use a recovery that allows them to enter near the head, slide forward, because that's going to take way too much time for them to set up the stroke. They have to use a more ballistic recovery that throws the arm forward, puts them in a position to create propulsion right away, and that will allow them to maintain their stroke rate while maintaining the effectiveness of the pull and their stroke length. And that allows them to create as much speed as possible. So while the underlying principles of effective arm recoveries are ultimately simple, be fast, be effortless, be direct, the specific expression of those principles is going to differ depending on the swimmer and depending on the event the swimmer is swimming. Let's take a look at these principles in action in elite athletes swimming different events. So this is a distance swimmer swimming over 1,500 meters. And in an event like this, there's going to be a priority for efficiency versus maximal speed. So in every event, the recoveries need to be direct. In longer events, there's more of a priority of an efficient recovery as opposed to a really fast recovery. So if we watch here, you can see the relaxation of the arms. They're coming over fast. There's no hesitation, but they're not being swung really, really, really aggressively. And so the other thing you tend to see over longer events The hand typically doesn't come up past the elbow. And so you see this swimmer here, while the elbow is certainly bent, he is still swinging the arm, and the hand is not swinging right along the surface. It's still being swung up. However, the hand really never comes above the elbow. It gets about parallel here. And so that allows him to swing. And the more swimmers can swing the recovery over, that's going to be a lot more effortless than pulling the arm forward. But he's not swimming over the top. He's keeping everything pretty direct. And the other thing you can notice is that the arm tends to be swung out to the side versus really over the top. The hand is still being swung. That, again, is going to allow swimmers to be really effortless. And it's not going to be pulled along the surface. It's going to be swung over the surface with the hand going a little bit out to the side. Again, the hand is coming almost as high as the elbow here. And that's going to maximize efficiency without compromising the stroke rate. And again, this swimmer doesn't need to have a super fast stroke rate because of the event he's swimming. One, it's not sustainable, and two, it's not necessary. And so again, it's all about creating a recovery that's going to be as efficient as possible so he can sustain it over the course of these longer events. Two more swimmers here, and they are swimming distance events. And what we're going to see is we're going to see the same basic dynamics. And so you're going to see, again, not super fast stroke rates. They're still swinging the arms over, but they're not swinging really, really aggressively, again, because they don't need to, because of the timing. And secondly, they can't afford to because of the length of the distances. And we're going to see two differences here. The swimmer up front is swinging the arms, kind of like our previous swimmer. Hand is swinging over and around the water, and that's happening on both sides. And the swimmer behind her is keeping the hand a little bit lower. The elbow is a little bit higher, a little bit more of the traditional high elbow recovery, and that's what's happening there. But at the same time, that swimmer on their right arm, if you see there, that's more of a swing. And then on the left side with the breathing, it's a little bit more of the traditional high elbow recovery. But again, they're still swinging these recoveries. They're letting them be ballistic. They're not trying to control them, because the more that they can be thrown forward, it's going to be a lot less effortful. And again, that allows for sustainability. So the key ideas here, they have to be fast enough for the timing of the stroke, and they have to be efficient so that swimmers can sustain their stroke rate throughout the entire race. Now, this is footage from the same race, and we've got a different angle here so we can get a better sense of how direct these recoveries are. So we see there, the hand is going to come over, the arm's going to come over, it's going to be right in front of the shoulder, and then we're going to see the same thing with the left arm. And so the swimmer is off to our left here a little bit, and that's going to create the perception that that left arm is coming a little bit further over across. But again, you can see there, we're a little bit more on track, more on center here with the camera. It's coming straight forward in front of her arm. And different swimmers are going to be a little bit more to the left, a little bit more to the right in front of where they are from the shoulder. And that's going to be, again, dependent a little bit on the range of motion that they have available. But you can see, relatively speaking, everything is coming straight forward. Everything is going straight in front of her, and the recovery is allowing her to get right into the stroke right away. So there's not really any hesitation. She doesn't have to adjust going left or right. She's able to get into it right away, and that's going to allow her to maintain a really effective stroke rate too, and she doesn't have to waste time repositioning, or she isn't forced to start pulling from an ineffective position. So even in distance events, it needs to be really direct in order to be really efficient and to maintain as much speed as possible by maintaining an effective stroke rate. What we'll see differences in is how high the swimmer swings the arms, how much bend there is to the elbow, how far it is out to the side. Those things are secondary to the fact that it needs to be fast, it needs to be direct, and it needs to be as effortless as possible. Now, if we take a look at a 100-meter race, we're going to see the same principles, but they're going to be expressed in a different way. And so we're still going to get the arm swinging, and you can see that all of these recoveries are swinging over the surface. They're all moving really quickly because there's more of a priority on stroke rate. But if you watch the hands, you can see that they're all relatively relaxed. They're not really forced. Swimmers are not swinging them out of the control. And most of the arms are still bent. And so they're swinging it over. And as we see here, some of the swimmers, they're going to have their hands a little bit higher over their elbow. So like swimmers closer to the front, right here in front of us, the hand is up above the elbow. Some swimmers, like the one right there, the hand is about even with the elbow. And so swimmers are going to have a slightly different strategy here in terms of how they recover. But again, they're moving their arms quickly. They're moving their arms as fast as they can within the rhythm of the stroke. the recovery is not slowing the stroke cycle down. There's not a whole lot of tension in these recoveries. And you can see to some extent that the hands are entering right in front of the shoulders. The hands are entering really straight. And so if we watch the swimmer right here in the frame, you can see that that arm is going to be entering directly in front of him. It's going to be fully extended so he can get into this stroke cycle as quickly as possible. And that's going to allow him to create as much propulsion as possible. We'll take a look at it from another angle head on, but you can see even here from this angle, the arms are moving straight out in front. They're not moving side to side, and that's allowing him to be more effective, more efficient with the arm recoveries. So a little bit more of an isolated shot with this one swimmer. You can see how quickly those arms are being recovered, and they're being recovered directly forward, and you can see how they're being swung over. So he's not swimming with a traditional high elbow. He's not swimming necessarily with a straight arm, but he is swimming with very ballistic recoveries. One, that's going to allow them to happen a lot faster. And two, it's a lot easier to swing the arm over versus kind of pull it forward. So it's going to allow them to recover quickly. It's going to allow them to recover with less effort. It's still going to be challenging at these stroke rates. And he's also, if you can see, he's recovering directly in front of the shoulder. And so everything is coming straight forward, and that's allowing him to get into the stroke cycle as quickly as he'd like. And that allows him to maintain as much speed as he can. Now, if we watch the arm recoveries here from that same race, we can see the first two swimmers on our left. They're going to enter, and you can see straight forward from the shoulder. Everything is straight in line, and that's going to allow swimmers to create propulsion as quickly and as effectively as possible. If we also notice that the arms are recovering over the water, and they're entering almost straight. And especially in the sprints, that allows swimmers to be in position to create propulsion as quickly as possible. And so again, with all these swimmers, the arms are recovering, and they are very direct. We're not seeing much side-to-side motion in terms of what happens after the entry. In almost every case, the arm is directly out in front when it enters the water, and that's going to allow them, again, to get into their stroke cycle as quickly as possible without having to adjust what they're doing or compromising the effectiveness of the pull. So the most dramatic difference in recoveries tends to be seen in the 50-meter races. That's where there's going to be a lot higher stroke rates. The arm recoveries are going to be much more ballistic, and so you can really see these arms swinging here. So if we watch the swimmer towards the top of the screen, you can see the hand coming way over the top here. The hand is much higher than the elbow. Now, if we watch the swimmer at the bottom here, when the arm exits the water, it swings straight, and then it kind of bends, and he whips it around, and then it's going to be, again, right in front of that shoulder. And so these recoveries are all much more ballistic. Now, if we watch the swimmer above him, the arm straightens as it comes out, then he bends it and whips it across. And so, again, much more ballistic recoveries. We're going to have a different type of recovery, but they're all swinging. It's rarely going to be completely straight. A lot of times the arm will straighten after it exits, and then as swimmers whip it around, it will bend. And again, that's going to allow swimmers to whip it into the position that they want, which is going to be right in front of the shoulder, and they're going to be able to enter at almost full extension, which is going to allow them to get into the stroke cycle faster. So swimmers are using the same basic strategy in this event, but as you can look across, you're going to see different types of arm recoveries in terms of how straight they are, how high they are, whether they're going over the top, more out to the side. And again, it's not right or wrong. It's more based upon what the individual can do based upon their physical structure. Now, if we look at some other swimmers here, we're going to see the same basic thing, and we're going to see very direct arm recoveries. We're going to see ballistic arm recoveries that are very quick, and we're going to see direct arm recovery. So all these swimmers, you can see they're swinging those arms right out into the front, and you can see right there, we've got a swimmer that's coming way over the top. Actually, these two swimmers right here are coming way over the top. And then now if we watch the swimmer at the bottom, they're going to be swinging much lower. It's still very direct. It's still ballistic, but it's going to be lower. And so again, all these swimmers are using a slightly different version of the same concepts. They're all being really fast with their stroke rate. They're being ballistic with their recoveries, and that's going to allow them to get into the front of the stroke quickly and do so with less effort. And they're all being very direct. You can see that they're all entering right in front of their shoulder. And we can see that here from this angle. Again, they're entering at full extension. They're entering more or less in front of their shoulder, and that allows them to get into the propulsive phase as quickly as possible with zero hesitation and zero compromise of the effectiveness of the pull. So in every case, arm recoveries need to be as fast as possible, as effortless as possible, and as direct as possible, and it needs to be a recovery that fits within the constraints of the swimmer's structure. They have to find a recovery that they can physically do, and that's why we see the different expressions of the recoveries based upon what the swimmer is physically capable of. They're swimming the same event, they have the same basic physical principles that they have to adhere to, and they find a different solution based upon what they are physically capable of. So recoveries have to be fast, direct, and effortless, and they have to be chosen based upon the swimmer's structure and the event that they're swimming. In freestyle, breaststroke, and butterfly, you see a range of effective arm recoveries. In backstroke, they're pretty much all the same. They're straight, they're fast, they're direct, and they're as effortless as possible. More than the other strokes, backstroke recoveries are extremely consistent in terms of how they're executed. Every effective backstroker is going to recover the arms straight, and they're going to recover the arms quickly and directly. The arms are going to come up straight out of the water, and they're going to enter more or less right above the shoulder. The directness of the recovery allows it to be quick. The straightness of the recovery allows it to be ballistic following the finish of the stroke. And the directness of the recovery allows swimmers to execute effective pulls as quickly as possible. When the recoveries aren't direct, swimmers are going to have to either take more time to reposition their arm, or they're going to have to execute pulls that don't create as much propulsion as possible. So while on the other strokes, finding an effective recovery is very much about determining which strategy is going to work best for each individual swimmer, in backstroke, the recoveries are all extremely similar. Let's take a look at how Olympic swimmers are making it happen. So if we watch from overhead, the biggest thing to notice is how direct the arms are. They're entering more or less right over the shoulder. Now some swimmers are going to be a little bit inside the shoulder, some swimmers are going to be directly on top of the shoulder, some swimmers are going to be a little bit outside the shoulder. But the range is going to be really, really small. And what that does is it allows swimmers to get into a position that allows them to create propulsion as quickly and as effectively as possible. So if we watch the swimmers on the left here, they're entering the arm right there on the right side. And again, if the arm is behind the head, they're going to have to move it over in order to get into an effective position. And if the arm is out to the side, then they're going to be compromised in terms of their setup of their stroke. No matter how well they set up the stroke from that position, they're going to be missing out on a good bit of propulsion. So again, the recoveries have to be direct. They have to be entering more or less over the shoulder. And again, that's going to allow them to set up the stroke as effectively as possible. Now, if we watch the path of the recovery here, what you can see is the hand's going to come out right at the hip, and it's going to more or less come straight over the top, and that's going to allow them to enter straight up over the top. Now, as swimmers are recovering the arm, some will bring the arm slightly in and then back out to get to shoulder width, and that's mostly going to be because that's the range of motion, that's the path of least resistance that they have access to with their shoulder, and it's going to be tied in with the rotation. But again, they're coming straight up out of it, and they're ending up straight up over the top, and you can see the arms are being swung completely straight. So rather than focusing on the details, what matters most is that the arm is straight, because that's going to allow the arm to be swung over the surface, and where the arm ends up is another key aspect of the recovery. It's critical that it ends up over the shoulder, plus or minus a little bit, and that's going to allow swimmers to get into the pull right away and do so without compromising the effectiveness of the pull. So again, you can see the recoveries here are all pretty similar. They're all straight. The entry position is going to be slightly different for each swimmer, but it's still going to be extremely direct. And again, there may be some inward motion of the arm during the recovery, but it's going to swing right back out, and it's going to end up right where it needs to be. And that's going to be a natural movement. That's going to be swimmers following the path of least resistance in terms of their range of motion, and typically doesn't need to be coached. If they end up in the right place, they're swinging straight, that detail will take care of it itself. And so if we watch the swimmer on the far left here, this right arm, you can see it comes across his face just a little bit as he recovers, and then as it comes back as he enters. Again, that's going to be dictated by the range of motion of the shoulder, how much that comes in or how much it doesn't come in. Again, that's not something to worry about. And if a swimmer isn't demonstrating that, again, I don't think that's something to worry about either. What we're really looking for is the straightness of the recovery and then where it ends up to allow swimmers to create propulsion as easily and as quickly as possible. Now, if we watch the recoveries from the side, we'll get a better understanding or a better appreciation of just how straight those recoveries are. So if you look at all the swimmers in the view here, they're all recovering really straight. Again, they're recovering really directly. And you can still see that they're entering right above the shoulder here as well. Different angle, it's going to be the same skill set. The other thing to pay attention to is that the arm recoveries are relatively free of tension. They're very much swung over the surface rather than pulled over the surface. And that's important because it allows swimmers to create more speed with the recovery, and just as importantly, it allows them to use less effort during the recovery. If they want to sustain fast stroke rates throughout the whole race, it's not about just achieving them, it's about achieving them in a way that uses as little energy as possible so that swimmers can repeat the movement over and over and over again. So the key idea is that the arm recoveries are direct, they're ballistic, and they're straight, and that's going to allow swimmers to recover them as quickly as possible with as little energy as possible and place the arm in a position that allows them to create propulsion as soon as possible and with as much effectiveness as possible. One final point here is the importance of rotation timing to ensure that swimmers are able to recover effectively. So to get the arm out of the water, what you'll see is that the arm that's recovering, that side of the body is going to be rotated up, and that's going to allow swimmers to recover, to let that hand come out of the water, and then swimmers are going to stay rotated to that side as they recover over, and then it's at the last second that they snap through to the other side, and that allows them to place the arm straight up overhead in a position where they can create propulsion effectively. And so making sure that swimmers have effective rotation timing and that they're not rotating during the pull, they're not rotating through the majority of the recovery, but it happens at entry and it happens at exit, that's going to allow them to recover more effectively as well. And so many times if swimmers struggle with their arm recoveries, it can also be related to poor rotational timing. And so cleaning that up makes it a lot easier for swimmers to recover effectively. And if they can recover effectively, they can pull effectively, and that means they can create speed. Without question, the double arm over the water recoveries make butterfly arm recoveries the most challenging. While you'll rarely hear a swimmer say that they couldn't get their arms out of the water in freestyle and backstroke, it happens in butterfly. The arms are recovered ballistically, and there's no such thing as a slow arm recovery. However, the more swimmers can make their arm recoveries effortless, even if they're fast, the more speed they're going to be able to create, and the longer they're going to be able to create that speed. Much like the other strokes, the principles of effective arm recoveries in butterfly are very similar. The arms need to be swung quickly over the water, they need to be swung over the water as effortlessly as possible, and the arm recoveries need to be direct. They need to be moving forward and they need to enter the water in an area that allows swimmers to quickly and effectively get into the next part of the stroke cycle. While those requirements or objectives need to be met, you'll see swimmers meet those objectives in different ways. Because swimmers' bones are different lengths, because they have different ranges of motion throughout the entire upper body, and because they have different levels of strength, they're going to use slightly different versions of an effective arm recovery. The key is to help swimmers learn to recover their arms effectively, efficiently, and directly while doing so within the limitations of their physical structure. Let's take a look at effective arm recoveries in elite swimmers, as well as the slight differences that swimmers use based upon their physical structure. So we'll start off by looking from the front, and what I want you to pay attention to is one, the directness of the recovery. So you can see his arms are going to enter more or less shoulder width, which is going to allow him to get into the next stroke cycle as quickly and as effectively as possible. The other thing to pay attention to is that you can see that the arms are swung over. So as he lets go of the water here, they kind of whip around and you can see that they just float over the surface. And so while they happen ballistically, you can see that there's not a lot of tension in the arms. They're very effortless and it's very fluid in terms of when it's happening. So swimmers need to avoid situations where they muscle the recoveries because that simply isn't sustainable. And as much as possible, they have to execute the recoveries so that the arms end up in an effective position to quickly set up the stroke for the next stroke cycle. Now, if we watch these two swimmers here, we're going to see the same dynamics in action. And what we'll see is that you're going to see a little bit different recovery between the two swimmers. So the swimmer on the bottom is going to kind of swing them up and over a little bit more. And the swimmer on the top is going to swing them a little bit lower, a little bit more directly. But what you see is both swimmers, you can see that they're thrown ballistically right when they let go of the water. The hands just kind of whip around right there. And so you can see they finish the stroke with bent elbows. Then the hands come out of the water, the arms swing straight, and they're going to swing over. And you can see both swimmers are entering the water very directly. They're entering about shoulder width, maybe a little bit wider, and that's going to allow them to get into the next stroke cycle quickly. So again, there's some difference in terms of the arm path that these swimmers use, However, they're still using the same principles. They're throwing the arms ballistically. They're using the release of the water at the end of the pull, kind of like as a rubber band. They'll let go of the rubber band and the arms just kind of flip around. And again, they're recovering directly, which is going to allow them to get into the next stroke cycle quickly. So it's called the arm recovery for a reason. As much as possible, swimmers want to be able to recover. If they're being very muscular, they're being very tense with the recovery, it's going to be difficult to do that. And they need to recover the arms forward so that they can get into position to start creating propulsion again. If there's a lot of effort involved, it's probably going to be slower and it's not going to be sustainable. And the quicker it can happen, the sooner swimmers can get back to creating lots of propulsion. This view is particularly useful because you can see a lot of different variations in terms of how the arms are recovered. So while all the swimmers are being very direct with their recoveries and they're being as effortless as possible and they're obviously moving their arms quickly, how they choose to do so is a little bit different. So if you watch the swimmer second from the bottom, he's going to come up over the top a little bit. You can see that the hands right there end up higher than the elbows. And then if you watch the swimmers up a couple frames, they're going to be a little bit lower with the recovery. So each swimmer is going to recover the arms with a slightly different strategy. And again, it's not better or worse. It's usually an adaptation based upon their physical structure. And swimmers ultimately have to choose a recovery that allows them to create as much speed for as little effort and allows them to be direct in terms of where the recovery ends up and where the entry is initiated. So if we watch from over top, you can see how direct the swimmers are being with their recoveries. And so they don't have time, especially in shorter events, but certainly over 200 meters, to adjust what happens upon entry. They don't want to be having to slide out. They don't want to be having to slide in. They want to be able to get into it right away. Butterfly is very much about momentum, and swimmers have to be able to maintain momentum to maintain speed and keep effort level down. So if you watch the recoveries, they're mostly entering about shoulder width. Some are a little bit narrower, some are a little bit wider, but they're throwing the arms and they're ending up where they need to be to quickly get into the next stroke cycle. And so a key aspect of an effective arm recovery is not just what it looks like aesthetically, but where it ends up in terms of where the arms are entering the water. So again, swimmers can quickly get into the next stroke cycle. This is one of the most important aspects of an effective recovery. If the arms don't end up where they need to be, one, swimmers are going to have to take the time to make the adjustment, or they're going to have to try to pull from that position. In both cases, that's going to lead to a loss of speed. To reiterate, there's important principles for effective arm recoveries, but there's not necessarily a specific arm path that swimmers need to achieve. So if we watch the two swimmers here in the front, we're going to see that one, the swimmer in the front is going to have a very low arm recovery, and then the swimmer in front of her is going to come very much over the top with the arm recoveries and then come forward. And so two very distinct arm paths that are being utilized, but both are very effective. One swimmer is the world record holder, one swimmer is the Olympic champion. So what's important is that the arm recoveries are direct, they're as effortless as possible, and they're quick. And in both cases, both these swimmers, they're achieving that. And so the differences are not so much about skill. If the swimmers reversed the arm recovery that they were using, they try to use the other strategy, they're probably going to be significantly less effective. And so what's important is to adhere to the principles and then find a solution that's appropriate for every swimmer. And so as long as they're being direct, as long as they're being fast, and as long as they're able to recover with as little effort as possible, they're on the right track for creating as much speed as possible. Recoveries in breaststroke differ significantly from the other strokes for one simple reason. The arms need to be recovered under the water. And that one simple change has a dramatic impact in terms of the challenge that the arm recoveries create. In contrast to the other strokes, the arm recoveries now have the potential to significantly slow swimmers down. Faster swimmers navigate the arm recoveries more effectively. The reason the arm recoveries in breaststroke are so important can be summarized in one word: drag. Because the arms are being recovered under the water, the recoveries can now create a ton of drag, which is going to slow swimmers down. The more effectively swimmers can recover the arms without creating a lot of drag or creating as little drag as possible, the faster they will swim. Just like the other strokes, the arm recoveries need to be fast and they need to be direct in order to be effective, but it's a lot more important for the recoveries to be direct and fast, because if they're slow, swimmers are going to be exposed to more drag for a longer period of time, and if they're not direct, they're also going to be creating a lot more drag. As much as possible, swimmers have to recover their arms forward as quickly as possible, and they have to do so as directly as possible, and they have to do so in a way that minimizes the amount of drag that they create. Swimmers can't afford to get their arms stuck under the chest. They have to get out of that position as quickly as possible. They need to get forwards as quickly as possible. While there are some exceptions, most effective breaststrokers will tend to recover the arms right at the surface of the water, and they'll get their arms to the surface of the water as quickly as they can, and from that point, they will recover them directly forward. There is some variation here. There's some people that don't do that exactly. However, it tends to be the strategy that is most effective for most swimmers. Again, what really matters is that the recoveries are direct and that they are fast, and getting them up to the surface of the water quickly and then moving them forward quickly allows swimmers to recover quickly and recover directly. And it puts them in a great position to set up the next stroke without any hesitation, which allows them to start creating more propulsion sooner, which means that they're going to be swimming faster. Let's take a look at how elite athletes make it happen. So if we watch this swimmer here, they're going to finish the pull right about there, and then they're going to move the hands up, and then they're going to move the hands forwards. And you can see that the hands are moving forwards mostly at the surface of the water. So this swimmer is going to bring them up and forwards a little bit at the same time rather than bringing them up directly forward. But once they're up, everything is moving forward and they're moving right at the surface of the water. And what that allows them to do is from this position here, there's no hesitation. As soon as the arms are recovered, as soon as they're back out in front, he doesn't have to make any adjustments. He can get right into the next stroke cycle. That's going to allow him to maintain a higher stroke rate. There's no wasted motion, and it's going to allow him to still effectively set up the next stroke. That means more propulsion, and that means more speed. So an effective recovery is going to minimize the amount of drag that's created, and it's going to allow for more propulsion to be created sooner. So again, the finish of the pull here, the hands are brought up to the surface. They're brought forwards a little bit in this case as they're being brought up. And then once they're at the surface, that's where you get the full extension forward. So again, the recoveries are quick. There's no hesitation here. There's no pause under the chest. You can see that the hands are moving. If we kind of go frame by frame here, the hands never stop moving. As soon as he finishes the pull here, they're moving into the recovery, and they're always moving directly forwards. He's not recovering the hands low, which tends to create a lot of drag. He's not bringing them up and out of the water, which can be effective for some swimmers, but if it's not done well, it can interfere with the rest of the stroke. So again, everything is moving up, and then it's moving forwards. Everything is very direct, and that's going to allow him to get into the next stroke cycle very quickly. Another important point to note is that some swimmers will recover the hands up and forwards and then dive down with the hands. And you can see that there is no diving down with this swimmer. Everything is coming directly forwards and there's no drop in the hand position. And so a lot of swimmers, when they do that, the hands are going to go down, but now they're not in position to get into the next stroke cycle quickly. So they either have to bring their hands up or they have to wait until their body naturally rises back up to the surface. And again, that's going to create more time. It's going to take more time, and that means a slower recovery, and that means more time until the next stroke cycle can be initiated. So again, everything is moving directly forwards. It's not moving down, and that's a key aspect of an effective recovery. The directness is not so much that they get up to the surface and then they move forwards. It's that they stay at the surface as well. So we've got two swimmers here swimming side by side, executing effective recoveries, and we'll see the same skills performed here as well as some subtle differences. So what we're going to see is that everything is moving forwards. If we watch the swimmer that's slightly ahead, as she finishes the pull here, everything moves straight up. And so in contrast to the previous swimmer, this swimmer brings things straight up and then moves them forwards right at the surface. But again, they're right at the surface, and then there's no dip down in the front. She gets right into the next stroke cycle. So extremely direct. She's coming right up to the surface with the recovery, driving everything forwards, and then getting right into the next stroke cycle. So a very, very clean, very effective recovery. And this swimmer in particular has a very high stroke rate, and it's not so much that she spins through the pull, she has just removed all of the unnecessary components during the recovery so that she can be as clean and as crisp. And because there aren't unnecessary components that are taking more time, she can keep her stroke rate up without sacrificing the pull. Now, if we watch the swimmer up top, she's going to finish her pull there. She's also going to move her hands right up, and so that you can see there's very little forward movement until right there where she's got her hands up at the surface. So again, she can be very direct with that. Now, she also has a slight dive compared to the other swimmer, but it is very, very, very subtle compared to what you may see with other swimmers. And again, she gets right into the next stroke cycle as well. And so she just has a slightly deeper pull as compared to the first swimmer, and that's really what the difference is going to be. But in both cases, the hands come straight up, they come straight forwards, and the swimmer gets into the next stroke cycle without unnecessary time spent in front of the stroke, correcting for any mistakes in terms of where the hands end up. So again, effective pull, coming straight up, and then coming straight forward. So a very clean, very simple, very elegant recovery that's very effective at creating a lot of speed. So same skills again, just from a different angle. This is going to be a 200 swimmer, so it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have a little bit more patience out in front, but there's going to be the same thing. So again, he's going to finish his pull right here. The hands move straight up to the surface. They're not really moving forwards much, and once they do get to the surface, now we see the extension forward. And again, the hands are right up at the surface. He's going to dive slightly down a little bit. Part of that is because he's gliding a lot further. One, that's the skill set of this swimmer, but two, this is over 200 meters. He has more time to be patient prior to getting into the next stroke cycle, and he's taking advantage of a very effective body position and a really strong kick. So still, same thing though, finishes pull here, hands are right up at the surface, and then he's moving forwards, and everything is moving right into the next stroke cycle. So again, it's the same thing. You don't see the hands with a lot of up and down motion once they're moving forward. Everything is very direct, and he doesn't move everything forward until he gets the hands up in position at the surface of the water to move everything forward. That's going to allow him to keep drag low and recover quickly to get out of that position fast and get into the next stroke cycle in a way that allows him to maintain as much propulsion. He doesn't have to rush the setup of the stroke, and he also doesn't have to slow down his stroke rate. So he's able to get into the position that he wants as quickly as possible without creating a ton of drag. Just as effective recoveries of the arms are critical for speed on the surface, so too are recovery of the legs during underwater kicking. If swimmers can't execute this skill quickly and effectively, they're ultimately going to swim slower underwater, which is going to compromise their performance. Let's take a look at what effective recoveries are during underwater kicking and why they're so important. One of the variables that's most consistently been shown to lead to fast underwater kicking is the recovery of the kick, or when the legs are moving behind the body. Foot speed during this motion has been shown to be absolutely critical. At a minimum, if swimmers can't recover their legs quickly, it's going to take more time until they can execute the next down kick. It's also possible, perhaps even likely, that a fast recovery of the legs is also important for generating propulsion in terms of the fluid dynamics that are happening during underwater kicking. The bottom line is that the feet need to be moving fast when they're moving behind the body just as much as when they're moving forward in front of the body. But it's not just about foot speed. How the legs are recovered matters as well. When watching underwater kicking, especially at speed, it's easy to get the impression that the knees are bending during the recovery of the kick, and many ineffective underwater kickers will actually emphasize this motion when they're trying to move through the water. In fact, the knees are never actively bent and the leg is lifted straight up. It's only when swimmers start to kick back down that the knee bends, and that is an important distinction. When the kick is executed in that way, it creates a whip-like kicking action rather than just a movement that's coming from the knee. So it allows the whole body to get involved in effective underwater kicking, and the wave that starts up top can be transferred down to the feet. And as I said, it can create a whip-like kicking action, which is both efficient and effective. It creates a lot of speed, and it allows swimmers to do so repeatedly. Since this motion can be relatively difficult to visualize until you've seen it, let's take a look at how elite swimmers make it happen. So if we watch this swimmer here, they're just finishing their down kick, the kick that's moving forward. And as you can see at this point, the legs are going to be straight at the finish of the down kick. Now what's going to happen during the recovery, you can see here, the legs are lifting completely straight up, and the only visible bend happens right there, but that's not driven by pulling the feet up. That's happening because the thighs are starting to move back down forward. And so in reality, while it looks like the feet continue to go higher and higher, what's happening is that the feet reach their highest point and then The knees bend because the thigh is being driven back down, and so the feet will actually stay in the same spot, but it looks like they're being elevated because the thigh is actually moving forward. And so by lifting the leg straight up and then snapping back down, that's going to create the whip-like action because the thighs are now moving forwards, the feet are not moving forwards, but eventually then the thigh will continue to move, that wave will catch up to the feet, and then everything will snap back down. So again, the legs are going to lift straight up. If someone's bent at the knees, they're going to lose that connection, and then their legs are driven back down in a wave. So the muscles of the torso are going to contract, the thigh is going to start moving forward, and then the shin moves forward, and then the ankles follow, and it all snaps through. As it happens, there's more range of motion, there's more speed, so by the end, the feet are moving through a really big range of motion with a lot of speed. But again, that can only happen when the legs are lifted straight up and then they're snapped down in a wave. The wave can't happen if the feet come up independent of the leg. So again, it's an aggressive kick down, but it's an aggressive kick back up. And if we watch the speed here, we're going to see that the feet are moving very quickly back up, but it's not moving in a bent motion like it is during the down kick. What's happening is that the legs are lifted straight up, the thighs reverse, the feet are actually stationary, and then everything travels all the way through. So an effective recovery is fast, and in contrast to the down kick, to the kick that's moving forward, the knees don't bend actively. They only bend once the down kick's happening, and that's what's driving the bend in the knee. And because the foot stays elevated, it's then whipped and snapped back down, and that allows swimmers to create a lot of propulsion during their down kick. So if we watch swimmers on their back, we're going to see the same skills. So the knees are bent here during the up kick, during the kick forward, then the kick is finished, and then the legs are being recovered straight back. And again, they only start to bend once the thigh starts to move forwards. And so the feet have reached their final point. They stay in that point. The thigh starts to move forward. The slack gets taken out of the system, and then boom, the legs snap forward. And again, that's where we're going to get a lot of propulsion. So the kick is going to be fast in both directions, and you can see that the feet are moving very quickly in both ways. So the feet are moving very quickly in both directions, but what's happening with the kick behind the body, the recovery, is that it's going to happen very straight, and then the bending happens once the thigh starts to move forward, and then everything snaps forward. So an effective recovery is going to be very straight. If swimmers are just bending at the knees, there's not going to be any sort of wave action to the kick. It's a wave action to the whole body, and that's going to severely compromise the effectiveness of the kick. So another swimmer here, we're going to see the kick down here, just finished. At this point, the legs are straight, and then they're brought straight up, and then you can see the thighs start to move forwards there, and that's where it's going to lead to the bending of the knee. And so the knees don't bend actively in terms of lifting the feet up. The whole leg is lifted up, and then when swimmers drive the knee back down, that bends the knee. The feet more or less stay in the same place, and then eventually everything snaps down, and that's going to create a big burst of propulsion, and that's ultimately what's going to lead to an effective kick. So the whole wave travels down the body. You can see the chest is low, then the abs are low, then the hips are low, then the knees are low, and then the feet are low. And for that wave to happen, the leg needs to be lifted straight up during the recovery. It needs to happen fast, so there's no delay in that wave, and it has to happen straight so that everything stays connected. And so that's going to lead to a very effective kick, as if swimmers can be really good in both directions. And importantly, while they have to be fast in both directions, the skill of the kick is not the same. There's going to be a much greater emphasis on a straight recovery, and then things are going to bend during the kick forward. And that dynamic, managing both of those two skills, which are distinct, and doing so at speed, is going to be really critical for fast underwater kicking.